So welcome to Ringo. We are happy to have you all here once again. Today is going to be a very interesting discussion. I'm really excited about today's session, and I know you are also excited because we are going to have an interesting discussion today. So just to refresh your memory, we met you in March, just a couple of months ago, and we introduced to you our journey for phase 2 of Ringo. We're excited to meet you here again. Interestingly, today's discussion will be more interactive, more engaging. We are having a community gathering. And you may wonder, what is a community gathering? Is it the same as what we had last March, our open house session? No. So in the open house, we introduced you to our strategy for RINGO Phase 2. We showed you the roadmap, we showed you our plan of our influencing. And in our community gathering today, where we are going to have a couple of them throughout the journey of RINGO Phase 2, we are going to reshare among ourselves. We are going to have opportunity to learn from each other. We are going to have opportunity to know what is happening in the ecosystem and what are the things that we need to embrace for our transformation and also shifting the work that we do. So today's session, we are focusing on one of the RINGO innovations that came out of our last 2 years for the first phase of the work. There are a couple of community gatherings that we'll be organizing quarterly basis throughout the RINGO journey. And in each of those community gatherings, we have the opportunity to discuss emerging innovation in the sector. So this session, we are going to look at one interesting innovation, that is the language innovation or the language RINGO prototype. That will be the focus of our discussion today. And I'm excited, and that's why I asked you, kindly rename yourself. Let me know the language you prefer as your first name, as the first, then your first name continue. So I will be happy to see everybody rename themselves with their language they prefer as the first, then you tell us the name of that you would like us to address you with the second. So we are going to discuss language, and it will be a very interesting conversation. We are going to look at how it connects to the whole sector and what are the interesting emerging opportunities around languages that we have to take advantage of. But to start with the language discussion, I want to be a little bit curious to know which language you speak most at home. So my colleague Catherine will be sharing a Menti link, the chat now. Kindly click on the link. And I have 2 questions that I want you to respond to it. So 2 questions in the Menti link. The first question is for you to tell us what language do you speak at home most of the time when you are not at work, when you are home with the family and friends and everyone. Which language do you mostly speak in? And the second question in my Mentimeter link is, what language do you use to communicate at work most of the time? So you have 2 questions. The first one, consider yourself in the house. Which language do you normally speak in at home? And then when you go to work, which language do you mostly use at your workplace? So we will give you the opportunity to tell us. I wish that everybody gets opportunity to tell us those languages. So please don't share it in the chat. Click on the Menti link and tell us your response in the Menti. So my colleagues will be reposting the Menti link. So we just click on and answer 2 questions. What language do you speak at home? And what language do you speak when you're at work? You may have several languages, but give me the most used language at home and the most used language at work. And I will want to also set the space for you to start thinking about language, because that will be the conversation that we are having today. So as you enter those languages that you prefer to use at home and at work, start thinking about language and start thinking about the use of language in our workplace and also in our houses. Okay, so as we fill in the Menti, great. I am thinking we all have entered our inputs. At this point, I will gladly hand it over to Jim for him to begin the conversation about language. And don't worry, you'll get to know an interesting feedback from our Menti session just now, very soon. But until then, let me hand it over to Jim, and Jim will take us through what we are going to discuss on language today. Over to you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Nancy. And the suspense about the multiple responses that many colleagues have shared with us, keeps me curious, And yes, like Nancy said, we will be seeing what our responses actually look like. For this session today, this community gathering today, we will be talking with actors across the globe who have been testing, innovations that can really explore the diversity of language and minimize language to stand as a barrier, to the great work that we are doing. And so we will be having a conversation with three renowned actors from across the globe. And permit me to introduce them to you even before we get, the outcome of our responses to the Mentimeter. First, permit me to introduce my own brother who is just down south, from where I am, or east, I should say, Dr. Moses Isoba, who is the Executive Director of the Uganda National NGO Forum, UNGOF, which is a civil society platform for governance and democracy influencing in Uganda. Prior to joining UNGOF, Dr. Isoba was a governance advisor with Action Aid International. He also worked as the program coordinator of the civil and political rights component of DANIDA Human Rights and Governance Program in Uganda. It is important to note that he is currently a member of the Reimagining INGOs Social Lab, a group of practitioners reimagining INGOs through disruption, innovation, and systematic thinking. Under RINGO, he is the idea carrier of the prototype of language and lexicon. And you see why, he is actually going to be sharing what he's been brainstorming alongside other colleagues across the globe in this regard. Dr. Isoba was just recently nominated to be a member of the advisory group on locally led development for Bonn in the UK. He has a wealth of knowledge, over 25 years of continuous experience in development work, with a wealth of skills and expertise in the governance arena. Good afternoon, Dr. Isoba. Are you here with us?
I've been here and I'm here.
Great, great, great. We are looking forward to this wonderful conversation. Next, who we'll be talking with is Masarat Dawood, who is the communications and advocacy lead at ADESO, an African organization that is based in Nairobi, Kenya. Her background is in communications, having worked in Dubai and London. She is also an active TEDx organizer and has curated the largest rural TEDx globally, which was hosted in Rajasthan in India. Congratulations to that, Dawood. Her recent work was working on communications and advocacy of Co-Impact's Gender Fund, preparing for its launch last year. That was in 2022. She is now working with ADESO on the Pledge for Change and advocating on getting funding to proximate organizations in Africa. Masarat, good afternoon. I hope it's afternoon where you are.
Yes, I'm typically, based in London, but right now I'm in Dubai. Hi, Jim, and thank you so much for this introduction. And it's really nice to be here with the RINGO community. And thank you for having me.
Great. We are so delighted to have you with us, and most importantly, exchanging with you for this very promising engagement. Next, who we'll be exchanging with is Alex Ross. who is the lead of Look, a small charity with the sole purpose of providing a collective, locally owned feedback and safe reporting mechanism. She is from New Zealand and has worked in the humanitarian and development sector for over 25 years. Alex, greetings wherever you are.
Thank you. Very great to be here. Thank you, Jim.
I didn't want to be tempted to say good afternoon because it is likely you may not be in the afternoon time zone yet, but great to have you.
I'm based in London, so yes, New Zealand's a long way away.
Thank you very much. And colleagues, very wonderful to have all of us here. I would just want to invite my wonderful colleague, Kat, to present to us what our responses project in terms of the language we use at home versus the language we use at work. What do we see? What does that mean to us? So what language do you speak at home most of the time? Thank you to all the 89 respondents who shared some feedback with us. We have English being the predominant language. We have German, Guten Morgen. I can't say good afternoon in German. We have Portuguese. We have English, German. We have Marwadi. That is wonderful. We have Hausa. We have Catalan, Dutch, and Spanish. Swiss, German. We have Creole at home, English at work. My wonderful people, Hauna, you know, that is Creole. Français, le français, bonjour les collègues. And at home, wow, we still see almost a similar trend. Creole at home, English at work, but English remains predominant as the language we speak at work. We have Ga. My Ga people are there. That's really, really great. Thank you so much, Catherine. We can still see the responses coming. What language do you use to communicate in your work most of the time? Thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine. And we can see the interplay of the language diversity we use in our different contexts, be it at work or be it at home. And English stands out as the most predominant. However, standing out as the most predominant language we use, be it at home or at work, it has come to be a key factor in the development space that needs to be relooked into how the language we use at work within this sector influences relationships, influences partnerships, influences the change or the pathway to the change we want to make. And of course, diverse actors from Pledge for Change, Loop, and the language innovation, group within RINGO have been rethinking the place of language in influencing the dynamics within our sector. And it is very, very critical for us to reflect and ponder over what this means, how it affects our work. And so we will be exchanging with these wonderful colleagues to find out what they've been doing, how it's been manifesting, what the experience has been over the period. And of course, if you have questions, if you have suggestions, if you have experiences to share, make use of the chat space, and we will definitely find time to come over to you to take some of your reflections. And permit me to invite you, Dr. Moses Isoba. I am sure you are very well there with us this moment. So can you tell us a little bit about the innovation that you've steered within the RINGO community and how that actually operates at this time? Moses?
Thank you, Jim, and it's my singular honor to be speaking to you about something that I really like doing, and this about the language. Right when I was invited into RINGO, an invitation that I accepted really with immense gratitude, but that we were really discussing a number of things that we thought would be the pivot for change, as we reimagine the INGO. But soon we totally got persuaded that if change is going to come, if with the change we want to come, if it's ever going to come, that one of the critical things that need to be changed is the language. Because we are trying to work around colonialism and coloniality. We are trying to decolonize. We are trying to reimagine a new system. We are trying to reimagine development. But then it dawned on us that development, as we understand it today, is primed in English, in Spanish, in French, which are really the languages that the Mentimeter was showing. And yet development is done on, and here I'm using on, is done on communities in the South. And many of these communities do not speak, English, do not speak Spanish, do not speak other languages except their traditional languages. So in a way, development carried with it that colonial what's the word? It carried with it colonialism, because the language itself in which development was being done, or continues to be done, is a colonial language. And so as you're talking about decolonization, it's important that we are able to ensure that we immunize ourselves against language which is colonial in nature, which is to an extent and oftentimes racist, sometimes negative or abusive in a way. And so for us, that we felt that it's important that we're able to address the aspect of language. And oftentimes development practitioners, we speak in acronyms, we speak in jargons, and this definitely makes it very difficult for people to understand what we're talking about. And so, and much when you refer back, it's not unusual for an INGO or for a donor agency to be going out and hiring an army of interpreters. The reason they hire this army of interpreters is to make sure that they are keeping their partners on the script. Because one of the challenges that you often have is that if messages are going to go through a number of people, chances are that at the end of it all, the last messenger might be off script and there's completely lost. So, there's an attempt to use an army of interpreters. Some INGOs have made glossaries, which are kind of like dictionaries. But that's an appreciation that something needs to be changed. And so it's against that background that we felt we need to do something on language and lexicon. And so one of the other things that also was an inspiration for us as a team was the messages behind certain words. You find in development language full of words, statements, sentences, idioms, which are pejorative in nature. And you can talk from the most common of capacity building to the one which is often used of global south, to empowerment, now to even localization. And you find that there is something that is somebody saying, I don't have sound. Can you hear me?
We are responding to him, Moses. Just continue. Thank you for observing that. We are actually keen on understanding how the prototype or the innovation, your steering is actually operating. Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things that we felt that some of the language is negative and it is subtle in nature. Like I've said, severally, people use some of these as a reference to seasons. It's not unusual for somebody to tell, let us meet in autumn, such and such a meeting will be in spring. And then to the people in the South, what is spring and what is autumn and all those kind of things. So what we felt as a model of innovation is to work on a language grid. And this is a set of words, a set of idioms and of phrases which we think need to be changed, and why they should be changed. And if they were changed, what would be the alternative? And so these are words which we think need to be flagged. They need to be red flagged, actually. They need to be avoided because we think they are negative and they carry negative messages. And we need to be able to change. So in our modest way, we were able to develop that. Of course, we are alive to the fact that language, our words, also need to be properly nuanced. And we need to understand the context in which we are saying that this is this to be flagged, because in different contexts, words may be understood differently. but it's important that we're able to make a shift, from words like beneficiaries to using language of co-investment, because that appreciates the power that communities have. And it appreciates the fact that when you're talking about development, that those who have money have to remove their blinkers. Money is not the only show in town, that communities also have got assets. And that these can, when they bring this asset, then they can be part of the co-investment. And so that was really that's one part of our model of innovation. The other is an attempt to use artificial intelligence to be able to decolonize language, to be, just using technology to be able to decolonize language. Never mind the negativity right now around artificial intelligence, but what we're actually developing is an intelligent website that could actually, be like a quasi Grammarly, which is actually what many people know, that, if you're using a wrong something, Grammarly would quickly be able to flag it up and, give you an option. So our hope is that we can actually be able to develop this where, people can actually be able, when you use a statement, a word, that this can be flagged, and, you can actually be able to feed into this an article, a blog, or anything, and then that can, it can actually be, you can have an interpretation. And so that's an area that is under development, and we continue to work on it. So those are really our two areas of the model of innovation.
Thank you so much. Those are quite daring and ambitious, and I'm really, very curious to know, looking at where you are at now, what are some of the challenges you've encountered, be it in terms of, integrating these innovations within or embedding these within institutions, or, people, stakeholders taking these and making use of them, or, what are any other challenges that you've encountered up to date, if any?
Yeah, of course there is. Yeah, I think as as we developed the prototype, I think we needed to move to the point of embedding. We needed to get a couple of INGOs that could accept to be the guinea pigs where we can actually try this out, where the INGO X can actually say we are willing to receive a concept note in local language. We are willing to make sure that we can get rid of this sort of language. But that has not been as easy as we thought. We could actually be able to do our evangelization. So our evangelization has not gone as fast as we could, though, yes, we've gotten some few INGOs that feel, yeah, this is something that we can actually try. So we hope that we can actually be able to use this next phase to do an evangelization, get more and more disciples of INGOs or even donors that can actually be able to try this out. It's really more of taking the INGOs and the donors from the comfort zone of doing or transacting business as usual to something else. So that's really one of the things. And of course, relatedly there, we've actually been, as a prototype, we've been singing that everybody has got a voice, really. It is just the microphones that are few. And so we think that by working on language, we are able to deepen inclusivity. We are able to share the microphone with those that we think are voiceless, because everybody has got a voice. And we think that that is one area that we can actually be able to broaden inclusivity, but also at the same time, make sure that our work is being is really getting into the where we want it to be. But then the second and perhaps really challenge that has really kind of like drew us back was to be able to get people that are tech savvy. I mean, as a team, really many of us on the team, with the exception of maybe Deborah and maybe a couple of others, that we are digital immigrants. And as digital immigrants, we lack the capability to be able to see what is it that we need. So much as we have in our heads, we know where we want to go. we need some tech survey or digital natives that really fully understand this, and we can be able to explain to them step by step and be able to develop this way of AI as a tool to decolonize language. So really, those are the two quick challenges that we've actually been able to, just being able to say, look, here are people that are tech savvy and are willing to be part of the team and working with us. That has been quite a Herculean task. And then getting INGOs that are willing to do a test run, a dry run of this, that has also been difficult because people prefer to do business as usual.
Thank you very much. I will definitely come back to you. I'm just reading a very interesting comment in the chat by Deborah Dunn. I use the lexicon most days as a check on a language. It came up today in a funding application with the use of the word beneficiary, a banned word in Ringo. We all need reminding and learning. Thank you so much, Moses, for taking us through this wonderful innovation that you are steering, and definitely it really looks like something that we will leverage to improve or enhance our ways of working in the days ahead. I would like to come to you, Alex, and we would like to know, from what you're doing at Look, what's the innovation all about and how does it really operate? Alex?
Yeah, lovely. So I'd like you all just to take a minute to imagine a social media platform where you can speak with anybody, person to person, across any languages and any input channel based on what you're used to using, solely focused on helping each other, with a strong moderation that's based on human-centered foundations, strong data protection protocols, and it's not focused on profit or extracting information for profit purposes, and where you can analyze the data at the aggregate level over time to see trends. Imagine if there was a Somali woman who asks about cholera. Maybe there's a Kenyan doctor or Somali diaspora living somewhere else who could reply directly to them in Swahili or in English, and they'd be able to hear it back on their phone through voice in Mai, in the local Somali dialect. Imagine if somebody speaking Cebuano in the Philippines had floods and wanted to ask where the closest shelter was. She could put it into Loop, and a woman who works in the hygiene, and the woman who's working in the shelter who speaks Tagalog but doesn't speak one of these lesser spoken languages in the Philippines could reply to her in the Philippines through her smartphone, and this woman would receive it on her Facebook Messenger in her own language. Or a survivor of sexual abuse asks for assistance in Bemba. It's completely confidential and is sent directly to the focal point of somebody near her who can reply to her in her own language directly. So these are all potential use cases. If I may, I'm just going to show you what we've got. We're not there yet, but we have something that's operational across languages. I hope you can see my screen. Across languages, you can see here we have 15 different languages on the platform. And 3 different scripts, but the platform is built in a way that you can have over 100 languages and every single script. So here you can see somebody in Somalia, we're reading it in English. We can check it into any of the different languages, the specific story, or turn the whole website back into it. Yeah, I've got lots of things popping up, sorry. It was a woman who's over 60 who was reporting in. You could reply to her directly in English, and we will get that back to her in Mahatiri by voice, which is how she chose to, where she's at in the modem operandi that she's used to speaking in her local community that she's comfortable with. I noticed here we have something from Zambia about the Shift the Power actions that are happening with the Zambian Governance Foundation. So somebody has fed back there as well. And then you can take that and look at it statistically over time at the different trends and analysis that come out about what are people feeding back about and who is it that's feeding back. And you can see the differences across gender, across minority groups, and then also across languages and different input mechanisms. So that's what we're trying to do. And I just to say that we're only halfway there. There's a lot more that we can build on there to have this crossing over of communication and engagement across languages and across different input channels. And we have a charitable franchise structure. So one of the challenges that we've sort of come across is making sure that it's not something that's designed at the global level as cookie cutter across different countries. So the thing that we've learned is it's hosted by networks of local civil society organizations who own Loop as a charitable franchise. And then they look at how do you communicate about it? How do you reduce more barriers to feedback? What kind of languages do people want to use in that context, etc. So this is how it's going. We're currently in 6 countries.
Thank you so very much, Alex. That's quite, amazing to say the least. And please, you can share the link in the chat so that, many colleagues here can interact with this platform. And why not give you feedback on their experiences so we make this platform what it needs to be in the days ahead. I am coming to you, Dawood. Pledge for change. What I see as a movement, I'm sure you have a better terminology for what it's all about, but can you just tell us what's the place of language in this great work you are leading at Pledge for Change, and how can we really make sure that language doesn't stand as a stumbling block to the advancements we want for our society? Dao?
Sure. Thanks, Jim. As I was sort of thinking about this piece, I think it's very much the context to how we think about language is very much important to also the story of the pledge as well. And I remember a couple of years ago, I came across the etymology, the root of this word denigrate came from Negro, which used in the context, literally, the word means to, defame, to really bring something down, it originates in this context of something to blacken. And I just found myself never using the word ever again once, and that you find once you see some of these things, you cannot unsee them. And I think there are just way too many words that exist in that context. And I think to what also Dr. Moses was saying, I think this is very much what, when we talk about decolonizing our language, I think this is what it is, because what decolonizing is, it's about abandoning. It is about undoing the psychological damage on us, on our countries, on our communities as well. And ultimately language and images and storytelling, they're all a form of an external expression of really thoughts and the way that we collectively think. So sort of having said that, now Adesso as an organization is 30 plus years old. And whether people have heard of Adesso or really followed the advocacy work of Degan Ali, for the last 10, 15 years, as we do this work, the Grand Bargain was one part of it. And subsequently, what has happened since 2020 is there's a lot of focus on the decolonizing work, which, I'd like to think is a bit different from localization, because it accounts for the wide gaze and also discussing colonialism as well. And as part of that influencing work was really then starting to think about the role of INGOs in this, and how do we make them work differently in the countries that they work in, and how do we kind of really make them see the colonial baggage and start undoing that. So that really is the context behind what was really driving the Pledge for Change. And what then happened initially, the initial group that we had were CARE, Plan International, Save the Children, Oxfam, and Christian Aid. And over 2 years, they've spent a lot of time sort of rethinking a lot of these things. And what we've come out with are 3 pledges, which, they're online. I won't go into too many details, but we came across these commitments around equitable partnerships, around authentic storytelling, and how do you then also influence for wider change. And I think what's relevant to this discussion is this authentic storytelling piece, because we've had the Grand Bargains and we've had all these pledges and commitments over the years. But what really makes this stand out, apart from the fact that this is Global South-led work, is the storytelling bit, the really sitting down and thinking about what are the ways we talk about the people we serve differently, and what does that look like. So those are sort of conversations that have really started as part of this process.
Thank you. You know, your last submission takes me back to Deborah's submission around, you know, the banned word in Ringo, beneficiaries. And, you know, there are a couple of interesting questions in the chat. We won't take all, sorry about that, wonderful participants at this session. But please, the links to Pledge for Change, to Loop are all in the chat. Feel free to visit them and interact with these platforms, and why not share your feedback on all of this. And we actually have, you know, Lucy Muyoyeta saying, amazing work, Alex. Loop is a game changer. Congratulations, Alex, for that great work. Moses, there are a couple of questions, you know, for the great work that you're doing, and a recommendation, which actually comes very close to a question I want to share with you. I think Mustafa shares as a proposal, it would be interested in collaborating with anthropologists, you know, because there is a prior question which seeks, I want to try to pin down that specific question. Is there a version of the lexicon for other languages, for example, Spanish or French? Dr. Moses?
No, the straight answer is no. We're definitely looking at English, and yeah, I mean, I think if we had a wider team, we'd actually be able to look out maybe for other pejorative words in Portuguese, in French, and what, yes. But right now, we gotten these words like beneficiary, you know, capacity building, field, global south. These are all English words that we use. And maybe it's also because development's predominantly in English, really.
Great. And that comes to, you know, maybe my final question to you. How can other stakeholders come on board to support, contribute to this initiative, to really make it to become a global phenomenon that will drive our practice in a direction that is more inclusive?
Yeah, I think the more the merrier. I think we, you know, the prototype has been a fairly small team. And I think we have it's an open invitation, the people that can really come and be able to challenge us, you know, challenge the way you know, maybe we're thinking about this and bringing new ideas. I think, yeah, the prototype is not an exclusive club. It's, you know, we're inviting many people. When you asked me about the challenge, one of the challenges I did mention is that the short supply of people that are tech savvy. I mean, I think if we're able to have more of those people join, maybe would actually be we would accelerate our segment of using AI to decolonize language. So yeah, I mean, the more collaborations we have, the better. We know whether talking about collaboration with anthropologists or whatever. I think the language change is quite pivotal in the kind of change that we're looking for. And I think the more people that we do have onto this, the better. It just for purposes of evangelization, for purposes of embedding, you know, we would really appreciate, for instance, INGOs that would be offering themselves to try this out, would be, you know, excited to have aid agencies that are, you know, trying to work on this in a modest way. We, as a prototype, we're not promising a revolution at this stage, but we think that what we do have is potentially a revolution if we're able to work along with it. It can actually be what could trigger the revolution, what could trigger the change that we want, that would be able to change the system. Because you know, the system is that thing that we do not touch, we can't put our hands on, but behind the system, behind that veil of the system, behind the veil of the INGOs, the human beings like you and me, and you know, we communicate, we interact amongst ourselves and with our partners with language of some sort. And we just know development is only going to be meaningful if we can actually be able to speak. And you know, and the more we continue speaking English, the more it reinforces the old power, the more it reinforces power and privilege, because the fact that I can speak English already creates some bit of power around me for just knowing that the Queen's language, not the Queen anymore, knowing the King's language.
I like that quick swap. Thank you very much. Colleagues, we will be moving into breakout rooms in a short while. To facilitate that process, we kindly invite you to rename yourselves, starting with your, the first word should be your language of preference, be it English, French, Kiswahili, so please do that renaming, and we will be sending ourselves into breakout rooms in a short while. But before we do that, Maserat, looking at the Pledge for Change and the great work you're doing around that, what have been some of the challenges you've encountered in the process of ensuring that we have this kind of body that is doing things differently?
Yes. So, in the starting part of this sort of process of discussions, a lot of people really assume that, poverty porn, sure, we are all against it, and that is a low-hanging fruit, and clearly we should be able to have some action items around that. But the question is, when we all align so easily around, yes, poverty porn is wrong and so on, why does it still exist? Like in 2023, why is it still a concern? But I think the challenges, and I'll pose them as questions here, if any of you have, any thoughts around it. I think it's something that we're still navigating as well. And so the two questions I'd say are challenges is, one is, how do you portray or depict an empowered individual? So if we're saying that we want to fundraise for something and we cannot and do not want to show people in a distressed state, we want to show, I know the word is problematic, empowered, but I will loosely use it for this discussion right now. So how do you fundraise for an empowered individual? I think that is one challenge of it's really a comms storytelling challenge. And the second, maybe a nuance or complication is when this sort of your, storytelling is tied to a business model. What is the room to reimagine, right? Like if it's sponsoring a child, you have to use images of children, for example, in that context. But how do you then, when your storytelling is tied to a business model, what is the room to really innovate? And I think CARE Australia in 2021 did try strength-based fundraising. And they did say that they actually got the same amount of money that they would otherwise. But I think there was a whole follow-up discussion on, but the geographies are different and people react differently, different countries and contexts and so on. So I don't think that the conversation went further. But I think these are kind of two challenges we face, but also I would like to put it to you guys as well, to maybe help think through.
Thank you for sharing that, thought-provoking teaser for us, to digest as we continue with these reflections. Colleagues, we will be moving into our breakout rooms, and definitely Moses, Maserat, Alex, we will be coming back to you. Thank you very much for those wonderful insights shared with everyone of us here. There are just two quick questions that we will be moving into our breakout rooms to deliberate around, and we will be actually getting into very small groups. The questions are in the chat. First of all, how do you see these innovations being useful in your work? Be it, utilizing a language grid, to inform the way we use language, or an AI tool, to help us use language in a very inclusive manner, or the way, Pledge for Change is incorporating language in its thinking and philosophy, or the tool shared with us by Alex, to use language in a more friendly and accessible manner across the globe. That is really groundbreaking. How do you see these innovations being useful in your work? What has the hearing about these innovations evoked for you? These are the two questions that we just want us all to think through in our respective groups. And I'll invite my colleague Rebecca, I'll invite my colleague Kat, to just take us into the respective groups to brainstorm around these two questions. The questions are in the chat, and we can make use of them in our breakout rooms. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Jim, and thank you to the three panelists. So we call this a community event because we want to be in conversation with each other as well. And so this is a wonderful opportunity for just a few minutes to find people who are from the same language group as you and speak in that language in response to the 2 questions that Jim has posted into the chat. So Kat, if you could open the rooms, you should hopefully find yourself in a group of people who speak the same language as you. So if you don't find yourself in a breakout group, it may be because we don't know what your language is, or it may be because you haven't clicked on the button yet. So if you do see a pop-up button inviting you to join a breakout group, please click on that. And if you're struggling at all, please unmute yourself and tell us how we can help. Hi, Julia. Thanks for letting us know. Let's see if we can hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, that works well. Kat, can we reassign Julia to a breakout group?
Let me just see if I can do that now for you, Julia.
Thank you.
Julia, which group were you in before?
I'm not sure. There were 2 other people there, but
Okay.
they were not really, I don't think they were speaking or able to speak. I'm not sure which one.
Okay, sorry, I'm having to manually scroll. I'll find you in a moment.
Hey, I am alone in my
Hi, Chibwe.
I'm alone in my breakout room.
Could we create a breakout for Julia and Chibwe, Kat?
Yep, I'll try to do that. One moment.
There's somebody else, but
Lovely, thank you. Hi, Chibwe.
Hi. I was having a conversation with myself. Oh, I WhatsApped Sparkle.
Thanks for coming back.
Yeah. Sparkle, she says, me too, I'll find you. So she's probably lost somewhere in there.
I'm not seeing quite how to do it, but I'm wondering if we can turn this open space into a breakout, if it is that there's English speakers here.
So Julia, Chibwe, and anybody else who finds themselves still here, please feel free to have a bit of a conversation about how you see these innovations being useful in your work and anything else that's been evoked for you by the presentations.
Can you share the questions again, please, in the chat? I left them in my room.
Yeah, you should see them at the bottom of the chat now. Can you see them, Chibwe? Jim has posted them again.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Sorry, I can only see you. I can't see the other participants in this room.
Julia, if you're able to
I'm here. I'm sorry, I'm not in a space where I can have my camera on, but I'm here.
Sure.
And happy to share some thoughts with you, Chibwe. Do you want to go first?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, how do you see these innovations being used in your work? What is hearing about these innovations works for you? Okay. So the in my work, I think the issue of language and the loop network. This is stuff that we are dealing with. Hey, Sparkle.
Hi, there's so many people not in their rooms. I wonder if we can move. If people having problems finding a room?
No, Sparkle, we're good. We're
You're
absolutely
good. Okay.
great. We're treating this as a breakout room. So
Perfect.
Chibwe was just talking.
Yeah, thanks. I was just saying the issue of language is so powerful, and it is definitely something that I'm taking away. Like, we have an away day with our youth board on Thursday. So that is definitely something we need to print out or have on the agenda to talk about. And we just spent the last month working with Sustainability Lab, to work out our comm strategy. And part of that was stress testing the language. Civil society, civil community, what do we mean by local? So these are real issues, and having a guide that everybody signs up to, I think, is really powerful. There's an acknowledgement that there's something wrong with the language, and we need to not fix, but do something about it. And the platform itself, I think I'll just speak about the two things. Like Loop, I love Loop so much, because that is something that is definitely needed, and we'll probably be having a conversation with her to see how we can engage with her. Because I just came across from the Bond meeting about their future. They've been doing, I don't know if you've seen that, I'll share it in the chat. They've done like horizon scanning for the sector, if we get Labour, we get Conservative, and just how the sector is changing. And digital came up really powerful, really big. And it's something we need to consider in all that we're doing. I'll just stop here because I think we just go on and on. I can always come back when other people say something. Thanks.
Thank you, Chibwe. Did you mention Bond?
Yes, I just
it.
Where is it? If you give me a second, I'll share what we were doing. So we had UNDP talking about their signals, spotlight signals for 2023. And the whole idea is to look at the trends, and not just look at the trends as trends, but look at them as signals, and then consider what it means for development, what it means for our work. So that was,
yeah,
it was really powerful. And they've just launched, if I can find it, there's so many tabs open, I'll find the document for you. It's really
thank you so much. That's actually really good timing for me, but that's on a personal note. Yeah. I also find it really interesting, and I've never heard of Loop before, and definitely we're an international organization, so we'll be using that, no doubt. I'm quite interested in the more philosophical side of things as well, because I work in communications and I worked for different NGOs, big and small. And I find that the big ones tend to have more resources to talk about language and decolonization, and the small ones have fewer resources, but they usually have more, I guess, drive and willingness to talk about decolonization. but it's hard for us to match that. I work for a smaller NGO now, but it's very hard for us to match that with reality, with capacity, with getting someone on board to lead those discussions internally and to make sure they're actually put into practice, so that we don't have just documents of vocabulary that we should be using, which is great, but we actually take that language and use it in practice and make sure that it's a practical thing as well. So I think for me, I would love any discussions on how to use minimum resources to do some of this work, and also to make sure that the documents and protocols on language and decolonizing narratives, so they also don't become a hindrance. And actually, we also kind of are mindful of the fact that some practical restrictions may be in place. And also tying into that, I'm also curious to, maybe not in this session, but in general, I'm curious about how the relationship between international donors and this language, because sometimes NGOs and civil society develop certain things, but then donors end up using different language. So then there's also a bit of a disconnect between what the donor is using, what we're using, but we have to report to the donor. We have to kind of speak their language, but if they're not using that language, it's not going to resonate. So just one example, localization is a big word right now, and the word beneficiaries is still a word often used by donors, but we in the civil society world are trying to not use that terminology. But then if the donor is still using it, how do we bridge that gap? So just some quick thoughts from me, but yeah, I would love to hear anyone else on that.
Thank you, Julia. I think, there's so many layers to this conversation, right? That it's got to be practical, it's got to be accessible. And also, I think you're right in terms of the resources that different sizes of organizations have. And I think that obviously affects their ability to adapt and change. And what we're trying to, the prototype that Moses is developing, we're hoping will be accessible and easy. Like just we're finding, we're a small team, like just the checklist to refer back to that is really helpful. And hopefully once the website is up and running, it will be something that's sort of fairly easy to implement. I think it's about a mindset shift as well. I think about how these ideas are taken on, and I think that's, you can have all the tools and resources, but you also need the shift in mindset to really commit to thinking about how you use language in all the different communications. So yeah, it's really interesting. Is there anyone else who's in this group who would like to share what these conversations are evoking for them, or talk about other innovations that you're aware of?
I think that the issue of language needs to be broken down. So, for example, what Moses has done, first of all, it's like 99.9 input from, the global south. So that is so powerful because it's not being done by people who actually might not understand the nuance, but the people who have done it are people who are recipients of this language directed at them. Oh, so we've got somebody new, so maybe I hand over to
that Lindsay.
Yes.
You're muted.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm here. Hi, Sparkle.
Hi. Were you in a breakout group?
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
We've closed the breakout group, so you may have seen a button that said the breakout groups are closing.
Discussion. I was having so much fun.
Did you click the the button?
Yeah, I think I did. I think I did by accident.
You evicted yourself a minute
I
early.
evicted myself, and it was like
Yeah.
very unfortunate because my participant was saying something really interesting. Like,
well, we're going to invite everyone to feedback, so hopefully we'll still get to hear those insights.
Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. All right, welcome back. I hope you had some fabulous conversations. You may have found yourself in mid-sentence by the time you were sprung back into the plenary. And we'd love to hear a couple of your thoughts. And the question is in the chat, just coming out of that conversation, how can these innovations be valuable to you around language? And so please raise a hand if you'd like to come in, and if we don't get a chance to hear everybody, please put your perceptions, your thoughts into the chat. How can these innovations around language be valuable to you? Who would like to share a few words?
I can go if we need, if people need a couple of minutes to put thoughts together. Our conversation actually, and Anne, Garrett, and Daniel were in the room, and our conversation actually sort of veered off a little bit. It started off with, talking about internally having a project where, Anne feels that we need to align and kind of come together and have reports in multiple languages, but there's no internal buy-in for things like that. And so we had a discussion on what that process may look like and what can we do. And then there was, I think the general discussion veered off in, for example, AI being problematic and not having accent support. The concept of language is very much not static. It changes so much. What is acceptable in one geography maybe is not acceptable anywhere else. How do we kind of fine tune these conversations for that without, relying on technology so much that AI can be flawed? And I think finally, really to have it, this is it's such a complicated conversation which still needs a learning attitude and a listening attitude. And trust is very, very integral to the process of how we tweak language and how we think about language, especially in the development and humanitarian sector.
Thank you, Masarat. So that last sentence is echoing loudly for me about the value of trust in navigating the kind of challenges that you've outlined there. Anybody else want to share, how can these innovations be valuable to you? And please feel free to be really practical. It would help us and the people who are spearheading these innovations to really think about it from your perspective. Jacob.
Yeah, I think just from my perspective, we've been going through a DEI process, going through kind of a number of related tasks. And I think the lexicon especially, and the idea of a program that you could use to pass a document for language, depending on how advanced the AI is and how well you can calibrate it, would be incredibly useful, especially when the pace is so fast and you're often having to churn out, well, in some cases, dozens of reports. It depends on the size of the organization, of course, but being able to have an AI pass that for you and ensure that there's nothing problematic or kind of problematically rooted would be great. Of course, there's a balance to be struck between that and how the AI is programmed, who's programming it, what is it looking for, what is it not, that kind of thing. That'll be the next big question. But yeah, it would be an incredibly useful tool. Its implementation will be interesting though.
Thank you, Jacob. Any other thoughts? How might this be useful to you? What's the value you're seeing? Zazie.
Hello. So Ndufo and I were having a conversation about this, and I think we had some reactions and thoughts which I'll aim to share here. We were speaking in French though, and I struggling a little bit, so Ndufu, do come in if if I haven't quite got this right. But I think one of the key kind of things is that we talked a lot about the what was it called again, the glossary, and how useful this is. And Ndufu was saying it'd be really useful to actually have this in French as well. And because it's a bit of a conversation starter. And then we got on to talking about how, I mean, the important kind of shift we want to see happening here is that people see the work and the collaboration, and how we need to be thinking from different perspectives. And I suppose some of the language around sharing that journey and sharing, having language that kind of reflects that would be really important. And really that's the beginning of the conversation, right? So obviously there's so much more you can add to that, but we both reacted very positively to the work that you've done, and we're just kind of thinking about, you know, what's next and how do we leverage this, into our work.
Exciting. Thanks, Zazie. We've got 2 more hands up, and I'm afraid we're going to have to cap it there. So let's hear from Philip and then Jess, and any other comments, please put them into the chat. We really want to know what you're thinking. Mustafa, you've just squeezed in the door. We'll make yours the last voice. Philip.
Yes, thank you very much. I think this is a nice initiative. With my background, my name is Philip Dia from Ghana, and I work more in rural communities in Ghana. I think with this, I am of the view that language is gradually changing, and because of foreign aid, and then because of foreign projects that are designed, language is gradually changing. With for me, for Ghana, English is the most one that we use, and because of that, the English language is gradually taking over the local languages, and it is also coming with some kind of additions that sometimes changes the meaning of our local languages. So, for example, I'm working on a project basically for people with disabilities, and you can see that the introduction of the English language, when our local language is being interpreted in the English language, then it turns into something new, and therefore they also have to let us polish it, or maybe to come out with different languages, different words and phrases to represent what the foreign language is. And that is my view for now, that gradually the language is changing based on donor projects and programs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Philip. Jess, just if you could keep it brief, we'd be grateful. And then Mustafa.
Yeah, so 3 things I wanted to say. I think the value is definitely in connecting with organizations who are also on this path. So just what are some of the barriers that we're facing together, and having that exchange. I think we said in our group how something like the lexicon can be a great door opener, because I think senior management is quite eager to sign it off, and it's something very nice. But being aware that that's not going to, so the business model is still behind it, as Mazat was saying earlier on. And if that doesn't change, then we're just policing words instead of, actually making the change. So I think it's a great door opener, and we need to push in this direction, but still follow it through. And then my last very, very short sentence would be, it would be great to know how we can get engaged in these things. We heard a couple of times who wants to connect, who wants to kind of put their hand up for prototyping. I think, we would love to get engaged. We're just trying to figure out what is there and what can we do. And so having that overview would be great. Thanks.
Fabulous. Thank you, Jess. Mustafa, love to hear your perceptions.
Merci beaucoup, Rebecca. Je suis content de... merci beaucoup, Rebecca. Est-ce que vous m'entendez bien?
And so
Vous m'entendez bien?
Feel free,
Yeah.
if you can't
Moi, je
understand
vous entends.
French, feel free to choose the English
non,
option
en
in the interpretation bar.
Okay, no problem.
Non, c'est peut-être personne qui entend la traduction.
Ah, merci. Merci beaucoup. Merci. Je suis très content de prendre part à Ringo Project là, parce que j'apprends toujours avec ce laboratoire là. Mais moi j'ai quelques commentaires que je voulais passer parce que ça fait 20 ans que je suis dans le monde des ONG au Canada, au Sénégal, en Canada, Sénégal, en Afrique. Et ma perception sur cette problématique qui est posée, c'est qu'il y a un effort à faire humanité ensemble. Pour moi, c'est très, très important. On parle de culture, on parle de langue. Et même ici, en Amérique du Nord, dans les universités, je ne vois pas beaucoup de chefs qui parlent de la culture de l'Afrique. Ça peut créer... C'est un problème, par exemple, que je veux partager avec vous. Mais l'autre problème, c'est que quand nous travaillons dans le domaine des ONG et que nous travaillons avec des communautés, il me semble important aussi, si on veut vraiment décoloniser ou bien changer, en fait, le problème systémique auquel nous sommes confrontés dans le domaine des ONG internationales, c'est que les ONG internationales, les acteurs des ONG internationales, doivent aussi faire un effort d'aller parler, d'aller apprendre la langue des communautés locales, y compris nous-mêmes qui sont dans nos sociétés, parce que nous, par exemple, si je prends l'exemple du Sénégal, on a la langue coloniale, c'est le français. Mais il n'est pas dit que les communautés avec lesquelles nous travaillons dans le monde rural ne parlent pas le français. Ils parlent des langues locales. Donc, nous aussi, nous avons une attitude réflexive à mener par rapport à nous en tant qu'acteurs. C'est quoi? C'est d'essayer de faire un effort de traduction pour passer d'une langue à une autre. Et ça, je pense que c'est quelque chose de très important et c'est ce que j'appelais faire humanité ensemble. Parce que quand on traduit la langue d'une autre langue, on est presque c'est la personne à qui on traduit sa langue. Et ça, il n'y a pas que... Je trouve ça très généreux et je trouve ça très humain. Voilà ce que je voulais partager. Merci.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mustafa. And it's just wonderful to hear the multiplicity of languages in this conversation about language. Shamsuddin, I'm so sorry we're not able to hear everybody's voices. And so if you are able to write into the chat, we do want to hear from you, but I'm afraid we have to move towards a close now. And so with that, I'm going to hand over to Deborah, and Deborah's going to share some updates on the phase that we're moving into and the prototyping that's happening. And then we'll close with some announcements from Nancy. Thanks, Deborah.
Great. I'll try and do this in 3 minutes or less. So really quickly, we've got an opportunity next week. Several people from RINGO Project and friends are going to the OECD DAC meeting. That's the Development Assistance Committee at the OECD, where they invite civil society, and they're especially going to be focusing on language. So Moses will be there, but also I hope on untying aid, which is the practice that requires bilateral funders to give to their domestic INGOs. So that's an opportunity next week. Also next week, our funder action pod is launching. And if there are any funders here who would like to be part of that, please get in touch. This is hosted by the Council on Foundation and is the second key pillar of our strategy over the next 2 years, which is a space where we hope that funders will take up some of the innovations emerging from the prototypes. And we're actively going to be working them to move from ideas into action. The board action pod is still recruiting. We're aiming to move the boards of INGOs into a more strategic space where they can not just listen, but also forge new models for their organization and adopt some of these prototypes and other prototypes happening in the sector. Specifically on the RINGO prototypes, the risk prototype, for those of you, you can look at more details on our website. This is hosted by ICSC, the International Civil Society Center. They're looking for new testing grounds. I'm really pleased to announce that One World Together, which wasn't an specific coached prototype, but emerged out of the RINGO process, has finally launched, and it's a direct solidarity funding platform where for a very small amount you can join directly in solidarity to give to local groups. That's really exciting. I've put the link in the chat. The Pledge for Change, I was just about to mention, that has actually grown. That's another family, and I guess they're all part of our family, and our community is looking for signatories. And I also believe the PGM prototype will be coming out with a toolkit imminently. If there are any other influencing opportunities or additions to the prototypes and how they've moved on over the last few months that I've missed, please put them in the chat. We will be doing future things that look at them and try to include them in those board action pods and the funder action pods. Rebecca, I did 2 minutes and 50 seconds.
You are amazing. And I think the last part of this session will be with you, Nancy, as you talk a bit about the research phase we're moving into.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. It was really an interesting conversation about language, and unfortunately our time, so we couldn't speak more, but I think we have a lot to discuss. So just to wrap up this conversation, I want us to sign up with this invitation. So RINGO Phase 2 is also commencing again with another research. So when we focused our mind, when we began RINGO, we began it with a research where we got a perspective from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and we wanted to know how organizations, local, national organizations in these regions relate or partner with INGOs. It was a very critical piece of work that shaped the entire process, and that helped us to come up with this innovation. So in Phase 2, we want to influence the sector. Specifically, we want to influence funders. We want to influence INGO boards. So we need to go back to ask those that we are trying to influence, to support them on what are the things that they would like to see different. And we are continuing the process, or we are beginning the process with our Phase 2 research, where we want to continue to capture voices from Africa, Asia, Latin America, actually throughout local, national organizations all over the place, to know what are the things, what do they want to see funders do differently? What do they want INGO boards to change their system into? It's going to be an interesting research. We will be sharing the link of the research in our next MailChimp, which will come up. Please, if you are not signed up to our mailing list, kindly put your email here, or kindly reach out to Sparkle, and she'll add you to our mailing list so that you get access to all our research details. So we will be launching this research very soon, and we look forward for you to help us share it widely to all your languages, to all your sector, because we want this to go wide. We want local, national organizations to give us perspective of what they see INGO boards and funders doing differently. And just to wrap up today's session, we are inviting you to join our next community gathering in the next 3 months. And it's a quarterly conversation that we are going to have. Just as we had this wonderful discussion about language, our next community gathering will focus on another area of partners that has come up, and we have come up with some innovation. So we will be communicating that to you very soon. just anticipate to join our next community gathering and also wait to hear from us to share your insights on this research. Thank you very much. I'll hand it over to Rebecca to close us, or Katrin to give us a wonderful music as we say bye-bye to.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And so we will end this amazing quick 90 minutes with some music. But before we have the music start, please unmute yourself and say goodbye in your mother tongue. So we'd love to hear all of the different voices. Adios.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye from Ghana.
Yeah,
Au revoir
from
du Niger. Merci, au revoir du Niger.
On a Corbero de Burkina.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, everyone. Really enjoyed your time.
Tot ziens, tot de volgende keer uit Nederland.
Bye everyone for Ivory Coast.
Au revoir, merci, maman Lisa du Niger.
Au revoir.
Au revoir, Dieu vous bénisse.
Ciao.
À bientôt.
Anjuma.
On a Corbero du Burkina, Bernard Cabore.
Thank you.
It is so nice hearing everybody is speaking the language as he signs out.